All right, let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem, Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Never Mind What You Believe, Let's Deal with Prophecy. And pretty much I was watching this video earlier, the elder Yashawamba did, pretty much dealing with that group Bow. And it was a video I first heard about, watching Elder Pastor's video. And I believe there was another brother that was, reacting to that video also. And the individual called himself breaking down Revelation 13. And also he called himself touching on Revelation chapter 20. Now, Revelation chapter 20 is pretty much, it's easy, but it's a complex breakdown because of the mysteries that are, written within that scripture. And it jumps in time. Remember, it's a mystery. I want to get this one precept right here. Sirach 9 or Ecclesiasticus 9, 3 and 19. Many are in high place and of renown, but mysteries are revealed unto the meek. And the mysteries that are revealed unto the meek are pretty much revealed unto the prophets of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. These precepts we've gone over many, many times, but you always have new members listening and watching. So Amos 3 and 7 says, surely the Lord power, the Lord God, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, will do nothing. But before he does anything, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. So before the Heavenly Father does anything, he reveals his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. And the prophets would receive these visions and write them down. And these visions would in certain cases, well, in most cases, some stuff was straightforward, but other stuff was pretty much symbolic, or should I say there were symbolisms that meant something else. All right. Just like, I'll give you an example, the Apostle John on the island of Patmos, he saw a vision of a great beast, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. He actually saw this in the vision, but the vision represented 7 major empires of the Edomites that represent the devil on the planet Earth. And there would be an 8th head that would come out of that, and it later on, the angel explained to him what that meant. But even back then, he didn't understand what it was, because it wasn't time for that understanding to come out, because the book had to be sealed unto the time of the end. And we're in the time of the end now, and the mysteries are being opened up to the prophets, and these individuals, you figure by now, after us being on YouTube for nearly almost 20 years, during the YouTube era, you would figure that these individuals, would know these breakdowns, as many videos that we've done on all the books of Revelation, Ezekiel, Daniel, Genesis, you would think that they would know all these breakdowns already, which shows you that these guys, don't take this truth serious. They just, use it for their own belly. So 2 Ezra chapter 9 and 1 says, he answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself. How do you measure the time? By what the prophecy says, and looking to the earth to see what's, what on earth resembles or speaks about, or is giving us the signs that these things that were written before are actually happening now, so that we can know that the time of Yahushua coming back is near. It says, and when thou seest part of the signs past. See, remember when Yahushua said, there should be famines and wars, rumors of wars. He said, but these are the beginning of sorrows, which I have told thee before. Then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made. So this is how we know that we're at the time of the very end, because of the signs that are happening worldwide, pointing to all of the prophecies that were written thousands of years ago. It says, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes and uproars of the people in the world, and we see that happening all over the place. But the problem is that the American media doesn't report on these things, because in the American media, they pretty much have a lot of fluff, for news, and they really don't report on any major issues because they're trying to keep the minds of the people occupied on BS, like celebrity gossip and sports and different forms of entertainment. Which is nothing wrong with with those things if you are grounded and what's going on and you got your eyes peeled on prophecy. But they use the same tactics that the ancient Roman Empire used, of something called bread and circuses. Now, bread and circuses, was the games, at the amphitheater, which later became known as the Colosseum, that the emperors would throw to pretty much keep the minds of the people, away from the more pressing issues of the Senate and the Senate House and legislation and the economy, of the Roman Empire. They wanted to keep them distracted from that, and that's pretty much what they're doing today, in America. So this entertainment world that they have set up is nothing more than the modern day bread and circuses, right? So it says, then shalt thou well understand. See, so when you start seeing even more of these things increase, then you shall well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. For like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest, and the end is being manifest now through the prophecies. And like the scripture says in Ecclesiastes, better is the ending of a thing than the beginning. Even so, the times also of the highest have plain beginnings and wonders and powerful works and endings and effects and signs. And this is what we're seeing, the effects and signs. That's how we measure the times and know that the MOTB is the micro CHIP based off of the direction the world is going in economically, because that is one thing that the Spirit of the Lord told us to look out for. Look out for this system, this MARK, where it's going to be mandatory for the world to accept, and they will not be able to operate as far as buying or selling or even anything, without taking that MARK. You see? All right. So let's go here and Revelation 20, like I said, is easy, but it's also complex because it's written in a mystery. It's written in a puzzle, and not everyone is awake to the puzzle, and shows you that we've been doing the lessons on it, and these guys still can't get it after 20 years just being on YouTube, almost 20 years. So it's complex. Now you have definition for complex, which is something that has many different moving parts to it, or many different parts to it. That's a complex. But then you have complex, right? Which is, what does it mean by being complex, right? Definition. The term complex refers to things that are puzzling and difficult to understand. And that's why these things are puzzling and difficult to understand to the average mind out there that's not tapped in to the Spirit. Let me see, stumbling blocks. And that's why we did a lesson yesterday called Stumbling Blocks and Distractions. And Satan was not allowing that video to go up. We did a walk and talk, and he wasn't having it. He just kept, buffering. And eventually what happened was the feed, it just ended. It just ended. What the hell is going on? Stumbling blocks. Let me try a stumbling block. All right. And he just was not having it, and that's exactly what's going on. From the entertainment world to these false prophets. All right, you know what? From entertainment world to the false prophets that are, you know, okay, stumbling blocks. See, and if for some reason it's not coming up in the other one. To the false prophets that are around teaching false doctrines, they have a lot of distractions going on because the Spirit has had us, beginning with Elder Pastor, hammering, because the word of the Lord is a hammer, and Esau's the nail. So the Lord has had us hammering, the MOTB system and the micro CHIP and all the technology, the digital currencies, the digital IDs and all of that, biometrics, so on and so forth. So much so that they need distractions to keep people's minds off of that system, because that is the system that they're bringing in place. So we're getting closer and closer to 2026, and 2026, could very well be the year when they push that, MOTB fully, because everything is in place. Everything is moving in that direction. WEF, which is the World Economic Forum, which is dealing with the economies of the world, their talking points are what? The new system being put into place, which would bring in an NWO, New World Order, because every time a New World Order would come in to the world, would be the end of an age and the beginning of another one. It would be through the economy. When you go back to the 1600s, and prior to that, you had something called the Dutch guilder, which was at the time the world reserve currency of the world. Then the British pound came in, I think, around the 1700s, if I'm not mistaken. And when the British pound took over that status, that began a new world order, and it gave dominance to the British pound worldwide. So that became the world reserve currency. Then in 1944, through the Bretton Woods Agreement, you had, the dollar that became the standard, or the Federal Reserve current, or the currency of the world, and that began the new world order. Now that we're in 2025, from like 2000 and on, they've been pushing for this digital system, and that's going to be the NWO, the new world order, or the final agenda for the so-called elite, to bring in this world reserve currency, and that is going to bring in a new order of the age. All right. So Ecclesiasticus 31:7, it says, it is a stumbling block unto them that sacrifice. That's not it. Ecclesiasticus 7:6, seek not to judge. Oh man, how does that scripture go? Plain. Let me see. Let me try this one. Plain to the, I believe it says stumbling blocks, as his ways. Ecclesiasticus 39:29, and his ways are plain unto the holy. See, stumbling blocks are there. I've spelled, unless I spelled it wrong, I spelled it good. Fucking hell. Satan, once again. As his ways are plain unto the holy, so are they stumbling blocks unto the wicked. All right. So this is why these individuals can't get it, because they're wicked. Until the Lord pull that veil off of them, and then they'll be able to see it. Because there's too many receipts out there. There's too much evidence of the MOTB being the micro CHIP. So much so that it's a talking point in many platforms out there, because that's the direction the world is going in. But they still have all these different distractions so that people can take their mind and their focus off of that. But nevertheless, going back to the word complex, what does it mean? Being complex. Definition: the term complex refers to things that are puzzling and difficult to understand, as we read here in Sirach 39, or Ecclesiasticus 39:24, as his ways are plain unto the holy, so are they stumbling blocks unto the wicked. And here, when you continue on, it says, there is often a lot going on. It's a term that is used a lot in social care to describe people in their situation, complex cases, complex lives, complex needs. In the case of what we're dealing with in the scriptures, is complex prophecies. You know, even though it's written plain, the Holy Spirit got to be working with you in order for you to get it. So when we go to, well, before we go here to Revelation 20, right? I typed in chat. This is a thought that came to mind earlier. It said, how long did the Byzantine Empire last, and what age followed it? Right? It says the Byzantine Empire lasted approximately 1,123 years, and that's about right. And it really started. It really started at in 96 A.D. when the last Edomite emperor sat on the throne, Domitian, which was a part of the Flavian dynasty. Once he fell, Nerva that came in, that began the reign of Jake. But the reason why the Byzantine Empire didn't start at that point was because they continued on the empire, of the Romans. So they were still pagan Romans. There were Israelites that were following the pagan Roman ways. And then when the eastern half of the Roman Empire got, going, you had Constantine that made, that embraced the religion of Christianity and allowed the people to worship openly Christianity. That's what began the Byzantine Empire. All right. And then from that period, there was a period of 1,000 years where Israelites were ruling until the age of the Renaissance, or when Esau started coming up in there. You also had, prior to that, in the same time period, around the same time period, you also had the Ottoman Empire, which were Edomites that embraced the religion of Islam, that were taking down the Christians back then. You see? So what happened was, that Renaissance period, because when the Ottoman Turks and Islam took over, because you had Ottoman Turks, which are Edomites that embraced the religion of Islam. You had Ishmaelites that embraced the religion of Islam, which was pushed upon them by the so-called black popes and the black cardinals and the jakes of the Roman Catholic Church, right? They were out there, and then you had jakes, which are known as the Moors, which embraced the religion of Islam. So you had three different factions of Islam back then, so you could understand, but all of those factions didn't spread, a Ishmaelite looking God to the world. That was done during the time of the Renaissance period. So it says the Byzantine Empire lasted approximately 1,123 years, founded 330 BC. I'm sorry, CE, which is the common era, or the Christian era in some circles. And we say AD, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, when Emperor Constantine I dedicated Constantinople as the new capital of the Roman Empire, right? And that's when the eastern part of the Roman Empire got on its way, because the western part of the empire was in decline, going back to the Edomite emperors. Then the Jake emperors, when they took over, eventually it started going down too. That's why they give that part of the empire, the fall of it was 476 AD. All right. So it says it fell 1453 CE when the Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople. And the one that captured Constantinople was Mehmet II. He was an Edomite that embraced the religion of Islam, that finally got through the impregnable fortress of Constantinople. And Constantinople, which was the old name of it, was eventually changed to Istanbul, Turkey. All right. And that is when the Edomite Muslims, for lack of better words, took over, that region. All right. But prior to that, you had something emerging known as the Renaissance period. The Renaissance period was a rebirth. When you look at the word Renaissance, re is back, and naissance is where you get the Spanish word nacer, which means to be born. So the rebirth of what? The rebirth of the Edomites coming back into power, because there was something that took place when from the time that they fell in 96 AD, and that their empire crumbled until they were able to resurface and be reborn through the Renaissance period. It says, what age followed the Byzantine Empire? The fall of Constantinople in 1453. And then you had also the fall of Spain, around the same time, is widely used by historians to mark the transition from the Middle Ages to the early modern period in European history. And when they say here European history, they're not talking about the Israelites that were ruling, because the Israelites were on their way down. They're talking about the Edomites that started to emerge again. So the age that followed the end of the Byzantine Empire was the early modern period, roughly 1500 to 1800. This era includes the Renaissance, already underway but accelerated by Greek scholars fleeing Constantinople. So you had some Jakes that was helping push that madness, as far as science and things of that nature. All right, but the part of them pushing art, Renaissance art, and all that was Esau. Right, the age of exploration, which goes back to so-called Christopher Columbus, and even before him, you had Magellan, and you had others that that were going on voyages. Marco Polo, that were going on voyages looking for different routes. Okay, it says the Protestant Reformation, which is Calvinism, and that whole movement, that these were former Roman Catholics that broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and protested against the Roman Catholic Church because they didn't agree with certain of their teachings. The rise of centralized nation states, right? So, I'm just gonna skip this because I have, it asked me if you'd like, I can also explain how its fall influenced the Renaissance, the Ottomans, or Europe more broadly, and I put yes, but I'm going to skip through this just to get to the point. All right. I want to get to another point because I had asked another question, but I want to skip that. I want to come down to the other question that I asked. I said, why were the dark-skinned icons changed to white ones during the Renaissance? All right. And they're going to give you, some bullshit that, the dark images was symbolic. It really didn't mean that was their color. It was symbolic. And the white ones represented more of the realist and the pale skin so-called Europeans that took over or that painted the likeness of the people that were around them. That part, the second part is true, but the first part is bullshit, because the dark images meant that they were dark-skinned people ruling, but they don't want that information to come out. And remember, the ChatGPT is being controlled by the mini caps. It's being manipulated to favor their point of view more than anybody else's point of view. And when you first went into it, it was unbiased. If I'm saying the word correctly, now it's biased in the behalf of them, the small hats. So, right before we read this, let's go to Revelation chapter 20. In Revelation chapter 20 and 1, it says here, Satan bound. It's not talking about the spiritual demon Satan. It's talking about his physical counterpart. And when you go through the scriptures, the Lord's will, if the Spirit allows, I may do a lesson on it if the Spirit, allows me to show you how this 7-headed dragon with the 10 horns represents people, represents empires. All right. It doesn't represent the actual spiritual demon Satan. They are operating under the power of the spiritual demon Satan, but this is not talking about the spiritual demon Satan. It's talking about their physical counterparts on the earth. And yes, they have physical counterparts on the earth. Let's go to Matthew chapter 13 and verse 38. Right? And it says, 38. It says, the field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. So you have individuals down here that are of the seed of Satan, so to speak, meaning they are influenced by the spiritual demon Satan. And those are the tares. Now the tares, the wicked ones, the wicked one, which is Satan, the children are the Edomites in general, the children of the wicked. You could read Malachi chapter 1, and it explains to you who the wicked or wicked people on the planet Earth are, right? But the tares are Edomites that look like Jake. You got a lot of dark skin, kinky hair, you know, individuals out there that look like Jakes that are really Edomites because their fathers are Edomites. And I'm not talking about just because your father looks like a so-called white man that you are an Edomite. You know, because you have some white-looking individuals out there that are really Israelites. In the case in point, in 2 generations, the line of Blake Griffith, right? What happened? It went from super dark to super light in just 2 generations. His son would be the 3rd generation. You know, the 3rd generation, which is his son, he came out looking like a white boy. So imagine if he got with a white woman and they had children, his sons would come out looking like more like Edomites. So that doesn't mean because you look like a so-called white person or because your father might look like a so-called white person that you are a so-called white person. It all depends on if that line goes back to the Edomite line. The scriptures say that the wicked shall not understand. So if you understand this truth, that means that you have to be an Israelite, because the scriptures say the Spirit beareth witness with our spirit that we are the sons of the living power. The scriptures don't lie. The scriptures are, the proof of who the Israelites are, because this truth will resonate with you. This truth doesn't resonate with Edomites. So now that we got that out the way, going back here. So this Satan is talking about a people that are known as Satan. In this case, in this chapter, it's talking about empires, which are compared to a beast. And when you go to the 17th chapter, it explains it. When you go to Revelation 17, that is, when you go to Daniel, the 7th chapter, it explains that those 4 beasts that Daniel saw in his vision represent kings or rulers or empires. Okay, so let's start here. Revelation 21. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit. So this bottomless pit, right, represents Europe. Lands are also known as pits, right? I forget if this is in Ecclesiastes or if it's in 2nd Esdras. I always forget. 2nd Esdras 5:34. And of all lands, it's talking about what? Lands. Subject matter is what? Lands. So out of all the lands of the whole world, thou was chosen thee one pit, meaning one plot of land, and of all the flowers thereof, one lily. So what is that pit or what is that land? It's talking about the land of Israel, or the land that the scholars call, so the scholars call the Fertile Crescent. Another name for it is also the Levant, which stems from the Nile River in Egypt all the way up to the Euphrates River. Okay, and that land is the most fertile land, on the planet Earth, and that land was reserved for the nation of Israel through the promise that the Heavenly Father made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, so that land over there is a pit. So lands are also known as pits. All right, so Revelation 20 represents the bottomless pit. Why? Because Europe, so-called Europe, is not known to be a fertile land like the so-called Middle East, or like India, Pakistan, and those different places where you have to get spices and different other resources that come from the ground, because Europe is not fertile like that, and the Lord made it that way on purpose. All right, so it says, so this bottomless pit, which is so-called Europe, and a great chain in his hand. So what is that great chain? That great chain represents slavery. Now, I don't know what it's going to say. I may have looked this up before. It might be 2 words. Great should be megas. Yep, megas. And chain is halesis. from halusis, a chain bound by which the body or any part of it, hands, feet, is bound. So, what binding was this? This was a spiritual binding. Just like when you read the scriptures and the curses, Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, from the 15th verse to the 68th verse, those, curses were a binding or a chain upon us, the Israelites, and we could not escape. The scriptures say that those curses would pursue and overtake us, and they would prevail over us. So when the time came that the Edomites fell, beginning in 96 AD, and then their empire fell, right? They were under a dark cloud because of the prophecy in Revelation chapter 20. And they could not emerge or come from under that dark cloud until their prison sentence was up. And that prison sentence was up during the time of the Renaissance period, when you understand the Renaissance period and what took place at that time. So going back, so let's read that again so you can, so we can recap. So it says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. So that represented, you could say slavery, or you could say a dark cloud that bound the Edomites for a period of 1,000 years. And that's and there's a reason why they call him the great red dragon. The Edomites are not white, they're red, as their name Edom represents. Edom goes back to the Hebrew word Adawam, which means red. It's different than Adama, because these so-called scholars try to push the narrative that Adam and Edom mean the same thing. They do not mean the same thing. Adama means ground. Adam or Adama is ground. The ground itself is called Adama. Edom is Adawam, which is red, and he was named that because of the red pottage that he ate from. All right. So get it right, Troop. So he says that this chain, and he laid hold on the dragon. Who is the dragon? The dragon at this point represents the Roman Empire, which are Edomites, which the Roman Empire was the empire that fell during the time of, when the Apostle John saw this vision. They were about to fall at that moment. All right. It says that old serpent, which goes back to what? To the Garden of Eden, which proves to you that it was a man and it was no fucking Canaanite. All right. They were brown-skinned people that had that serpent spirit, that demonic, Satan spirit in them. Then eventually that demonic satanic spirit came into the son of Adam by the name of Cain. And that's why they became known as the sons of the wicked. In 1 John, it calls them, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one. All right. Then when the flood came, it wiped away the seed of the wicked, and they came back again through a man by the name of, or a baby by the name of Esau, which was born to Isaac and Rebekah. And that's where that demonic spirit came through again. The spirit of Satan. All right. So that dragon, which is the Roman Empire, right? That old serpent, going back to the garden, which is the devil. The word devil means slanderer. And they are the biggest slanderers on the planet. They slander the Most High. That's why the 13th chapter of Revelation speaks about them, speaking great things in blasphemy or something along those lines. It says, and Satan. The word Satan means adversary. So they are the biggest adversaries to the Most High. Everything that Yahweh Bashim Yahushua stands for, they stand against. This is why they're setting up this new digital system, this demonic technocracy, so that they can erase any memory of the Most High and engineer everything that the Lord created, including humans, and bound him 1,000 years. All right. So that 1,000 year period, as we read in the chat, goes back to when from the fall of the Roman Empire, you know, the Western Roman Empire, which was the Edomite Empire, until the time of the Renaissance period. Right? It says, and cast them into the bottomless pit. So they were in that area and couldn't come out of that dark cloud, just like we're in America and we can't come out from under this dark cloud of the curses, and shut him up. Let's look up this word, shut him up. Let's look up the word, shut him up first. Bottom and shut him up. Okay, so let's go to shut. The word shut is Cleo. Cleo. To shut up, metaphorically, to cause the heavens to withhold rain. In the case of Esau, cause the Edomites not to deceive the world anymore. Because when the Renaissance period happened, that wasn't the first time that these devils deceived the world. All right, that deception goes way back in the time, during the time of the caveman, Neanderthal, the troglodyte, Salakia. So this is First Maccabees. This is during the time of the Greeks, chapter 3, verse 48. It says, and laid open the book of the law. This is dealing with the Edomites, right? The Greek Edomites. They laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen, these devils, had sought to paint the likeness of their images. See? So they painted the likeness of their images in our books back then. They were also known as the abomination of desolation back during the time of the Greeks, but that has nothing to do with Daniel, the 9th chapter, and Matthew, the 24th chapter. So understand that yes, the Edomites in general are the abomination that make it desolate, but the abomination that make it desolate spoken of in the prophecy of Daniel 9 and Matthew 24 has nothing to do with the Greeks, even though they're the same people. So understand that. All right. So so during the time of the Renaissance period, that wasn't the first time that they deceived the world. Going all the way back to the beginning, they deceived. You know, the serpent or the man that was in the garden deceived Eve, and that's been their whole mantra or their whole legacy going all the way back then. So the Renaissance period wasn't the first time that they deceived the world. All right, it goes way back in the time. All right, so going back here to the word Cleo or Cleo, right? It says to shut up compassion so that it is like a thing inaccessible to one, to be devoid of pity towards one, to obstruct the entrance into the kingdom of heaven. All right, that's going into them wicked Pharisees and Sadducees. So it says to cause the heavens to withhold rain. So the Lord shut them up, put a dark cloud over them that they could not, come up out of it. Let's see what happens if we put in dark cloud definition. Let's see what comes up. Let's see. A dark cloud refers to something ominous, signaling trouble as unhappiness, like a looming storm, but it also describes actual dark clouds to block light. Figuratively, it represents despair, worry, or a shadow over something positive. Dark cloud over one, over a person. Let's see, over a person. All right. So it says a dark cloud over a person is a metaphor for a looming problem, period of bad luck, or heavy emotional burden. See, meaning bad things are likely to happen or that the person is experiencing significant worry, unhappiness, or impending challenges, like a literal storm cloud signaling bad weather. It signifies a difficult situation or future event, casting a shadow, often related to unresolved grief, anxiety, or general misfortune. So that when the Lord shut them up, when He cast them into that, bound them with that chain, that represented that a dark cloud was going to be over them. They were put in a very difficult position, just like we were put in a very difficult position when the curses came upon us. All right. So going back, so shut up. Let's read that again because there's another point in here. It says, and cast him into the bottomless pit, so-called Europe, and shut him up and set a seal upon him. Let's see what the word seal is. Seal is sfragizo. Yep, sfragizo, which is an actual seal. Now the elect are sealed spiritually, and this was sealed. They were sealed. It was a spiritual seal, right? That happened to Esau, but it actually happened to them physically because they couldn't come out from under that because the Lord was the one controlling it, right? It says that he should not deceive the nations no more. I'm sorry, that he should deceive the nations no more. See? Why? Because that's what they would do. Going all the way back to the beginning, they're deceptive. Till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season, and that little season was during the Renaissance period. So now, most people that read this chapter, because they have no understanding, they'll go right into the 4th verse and continue reading. So this is where the misconception or the confusion comes in, or the complexity comes in. When continuing reading is going to throw you off because these are two different periods. So really the way we should read it is verses 1, 2, and 3, and then jump to verse 7. Because he said, what? He said, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. When we jump to the 7th verse, what does it say there? Satan freed, then doomed. And when the 1,000 years are expired, meaning what? That 1,000 years from the fall of Rome till the Renaissance period, which we read was a little over 1,000 years. Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. So he got released from that dark cloud. Because there was a certain period of time that dark cloud would be over them, and that dark cloud was over them for what? A period of 1,000 years. So the word there is for loose is luau or luo, to loose any person or thing tied or fastened, bandage of the feet, the shoes. To loose one bound, an example, to unbind, release from bonds, set free. So you get the idea. All right. So they were loosed from that prison sentence. All right. So let's read that again. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall what? Go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth. And how did they deceive the nations? By bringing out their picture as being the Most High, Yahweh Shai, the angels, so on and so forth, as we read in 1 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, in the 48th verse, that they paint the likeness of the image, in our books. When we go to Proverbs chapter 9, verse 24. Is it Proverbs? No, Job, not Proverbs, Job. We go to the scripture so much, and sometimes you forget like exactly where it's at. Job 9 and 24 says, the earth, meaning the entire planet, is given as a possession into the hand of the wicked. It's in their power, in their control. So what does he do? He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. So how does he cover the faces of the judges thereof? By putting up his own. When you go to that word cover, and this is why the Lord said that when the time came, he would peel the cover off that was put over all nations. The word there is kasa, right? Kasa, which means to cover, conceal, hide. So they hid the true images of the Lord by putting up their images. And now when you ask chat about the dark images, they keep saying that, well, that really, they weren't really dark-skinned people. That was just symbolic, and it was symbolic. It didn't mean that it was actually, they were actually dark. No, it meant that they were actually dark. But you were programmed, because you're going to put out there what they want you to put out there. You're programmed to say that it was symbolic. But when the Renaissance period came out, that was really actual, the way the people are, because of the Michelangelo and Leonardo, they painted the pictures of the people that looked like them, which are very pale, people. So it's a bunch of bullshit. All right. So you get the idea to cover, spread over. So that's why the Lord said he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people. So going back to Revelation 20 and 8, and he shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. And how did they do that? Through something known as the Renaissance. Right? So I asked, why were the dark skinned icons changed to white ones during the Renaissance? The shift from dark skin or darker toned icons to pale European looking ones during the Renaissance wasn't caused by a single event. It was a result of artistic changes, cultural biases, and theological trends that developed over centuries. Here is the clearest explanation. Renaissance art favored realism, and realism meant using local European models because remember, they were loosed out of their prison. So they started to get a foothold, but it took time because the Renaissance period really started in the 1300s, but it didn't really rise to prominence until roughly around the mid 1400s to the late 1400s, up until around the 1600s or so. Medieval and Byzantine icons did not try to show literal skin tone, which is bullshit. Bullshit. Because when you type in icons, Russian icons, you see that they were dark-skinned people. They had woolly hair. So what was this? Woolly hair symbolic? Were the wide nose is symbolic? What did the wide nose represent? Did it represent, something, that it was a pleasant smell? Or what did it represent? What did the dark skin represent? A dark skin or olive tone? They use symbolic colors, bullshit, often dark or olive tones to convey spirituality, timelessness, or divinity. Wait a minute, divinity is divine. That means most high. So if they're using it to express divinity, that means that the Heavenly Father, his Son, the angels are dark-skinned people. Just like it states in Daniel 7 and 9, Daniel 10, 5 and 6, and Revelation 1, 13 to 15, and many others. But in the Renaissance, 1400s to the 1500s, artists like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael shifted toward naturalism. They painted religious figures using local Italian and Northern European models who were overwhelmingly pale-skinned. Why? Because the Renaissance period loosed the pale-skinned Edomite red devil, pink brute, out of their prison sentence. Because you cannot trump prophecy. Once prophecy reaches that point in time, then the prophecy starts speaking. So during the time of the Renaissance period, that was during the time of great deception. Just bear with me 1 second. Great deception. So the Renaissance period brought in a time of great deception. That's why they painted them, overwhelmingly pale skin. Why? Because the pale skin, red, pink brute Edomite took over. So it says religious figures were humanized and made to look like the people around the artists. This gradually replaced earlier, more symbolic dark tone iconography. Bullshit. The dark that wasn't symbolic, it was actually dark tone. And you could go and go online if you could still find them and type in like Russian icons or Byzantine icons, and you'll see that they were dark skinned people. You see, they'll have woolly hair, they have wide nose, dark skin. Some of them, had different shaped noses. Some of the, because Jake straightened their hair out during the 20s, 30s, 40s. Jake was, even up to the 60s, I believe. Jake was, putting that conch in their hair, whatever the fuck, and straightening out their hair with the straightening combs, So that was always something that Jake did. And you could see for yourself that these icons, that they were actually dark-skinned people, and it was not symbolic. They represented the people that were ruling at the time. Why in the hell are you going to have white-looking people putting up images of so-called black people saying, no, it's symbolic of divinity, and fuck out of here. Eurocentric beauty standards became dominant. Renaissance Europe developed a cultural ideal of beauty, light skin, lighter brown hair, refined facial features by European standards. So they took away the wide noses, the dark skin, the woolly hair, and made them look like them. Why? Because they were loosed out of their prison sentence and put up images of themselves to what? To deceive the world, because that's what was given to them. So artists often cast Yahushua, Mary, and saints in the aesthetics because it conveyed purity and nobility in the artistic language of the time. Bullshit. It was something known as iconoclast. Iconoclast is the defacing of images. In some cases, they broke the images. They say it was sacrilegious. Why was it sacrilegious to them? And then why did they break the images and paint over them? It was sacrilegious because they had reconquered the world, and now it was sacrilegious to have dark-skinned images up representing the people of the Most High when the people that took over are Edomite looking or white looking, so-called. It said patrons, churches, nobles, city-states expected this style. Yeah, because they wanted something that looked like them. Artists needed to create works that would be accepted and purchased. You're not going to purchase no pictures of a dark-skinned person as the Most High, Yahushua, the angels, the saints. It says, so whiteness, which is no such thing as whiteness, became associated with holiness and perfection in Western art, not because of theology, but because of cultural taste. And it was great deception. Medieval and early Byzantine icons already varied in color. Many were not originally white or black. Earlier icons often used brown, olive, or reddish brown tones. Why? Because the Israelites were from a dark skin to a light skin, ruddy tones in there. All right. And the word ruddy means brown skin with reddish tones in there. All right. Like King David. Common in Mediterranean populations, stylized shading that made faces appear darker. No, it was no stylized shading. Bullshit. So you see how these devils, these small hats that are controlling everything are pushing that narrative on here. Well, when you see the dark ones with the afros, that's really just symbolic. But when you see the white ones, that represents purity. This is the real shit right here. But this over here, this is the fake stuff. Fuck out of here. Dark varnishes that have darkened over time. Yeah, like that stupid Russian bitch that said, the icons, they were darker because there's a lot of dirt on them. Over the years, there's a lot of dust and dirt accumulated on them. Get the fuck out of here. You think we were born yesterday? Says we didn't fall off the watermelon truck, like El Apostle Caparo, he says. We didn't fall off no goddamn watermelon truck, all right? Or the pana truck, which is breadfruit, that's or the plátano truck, all right? We weren't riding down the road, a bumpy ass road, and all of a sudden you fall off the goddamn plantain or the platano, the platano truck. The fuck out of here. Says some icons that look black today are actually the result of centuries of candle soot and oxidized varnish. Get the fuck out of here. But this is the deception. But the Renaissance replaced these stylized symbolic forms with a European naturalistic vision. Okay, so how long have these icons or new icons, Renaissance art, how long has it been around? At least 600 years or more? So why is it that when we look at these pictures, they don't have all that soot and the varnish and all that, and the darkness of the varnish? How come they didn't get dirty? How come 600 plus years later, however long it's been, give or take, how come those images don't look darker? Because of the soot and the soot from the candles and the dust that have accumulated over them over the years. But you see how the devil operates? Time of great deception. The time of deception in art, the time of deception in wording, the way they word things and say things. The serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which Yahweh had made. Western Europe separated from Eastern Christian artistic tradition. The Renaissance took place in Catholic Western Europe, not in the Orthodox East. Why Western Europe? Because that's where Esau was at first. And then they started to take over. You see? Because you got to remember, the Spain fell. You had the Edomite kings and queens. Then you had Rodrigo Borgia, which was Pope Alexander VI. These Edomite devils started taking over. So they started pushing their deception and weaving their deception on the world. It says, not in the Orthodox East. Eastern Orthodox iconography preserved darker, older, more symbolic style. Bullshit. They were darker images. Did not adopt Renaissance naturalism, still showed Yahushua and Mary with olive or darker tones today because they are dark-skinned people. Western Europe, however, fully embraced the new artistic style and exported it worldwide through colonialism and missionary work. Yeah, because colonialism was them conquering lands and also pushing their image and their religion and their way of government, so on and so forth, on the people that they conquered. Okay? Colonialism later reinforced white images of Yahushua and Mary. From the 1500s onward, European art spread with missionaries to Africa, Asia, and the Americas, which is what? Ar-Sareth. America is Ar-Sareth in the Bible when you read the Apocrypha. 2 Ezra 13, from around the 39th verse to about the 45th verse. This is the place, wherever mankind dwelt, that the 10 tribes came to when they fled from the captivity of the Assyrian Empire. It says these white images became the standard in colonized region. See, it became the standard. Why? Because the dark cloud was off Esau. They were on the mission. They were on a mission to conquer the world because they had to fulfill prophecy. See, they had to have the whole world in their hand. By the time Yahushua comes back, that's why I said, who's the main man on his hit list? The main nation on his hit list? The Edomites. Who is this that coming from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? Indigenous, right, and darker portrayals were often discouraged or replaced. See? You don't want that. You want this white image. Look at this white image. This right here, you ain't going to get no better than this. If it ain't white, it ain't right. If it's black, get back. So this is what the devil did. And he beat it so much into Jake that Jake loves this goddamn devil. It's beyond Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is somebody that has some kind of sanity in comparison to the shit that Jake is into today with these devils. I'm being facetious, but it's true. What Jake has today is totally, delusional. And this is something that was beat into you for centuries. So much so that it's ingrained in your spirit. You're seared with a hot iron of the image of these devils. So much so that you got these Israelites that know that they're Israelites, that know who the devil is, that want to embrace the devil. This helped what? Cement a global association of Christian sacred figures with European features. It was a deception, gradualism, conquering and pretty much telling people like, look, this is the image, you're going to accept it. You're going to accept it or else. Summary: why did dark icons become white during the Renaissance? Not because Yahushua and Mary were understood as white. They were not. They were Israelites of the tribe of Judah, brown-skinned people. The church issued a command. Yes, they did issue a command. And they went around deceiving the people because they usurped the authority from the Israelites, the true Israelites, the dark-skinned Israelites, into them taking on that role. Dark images were incorrect. Dark images were correct. But because Renaissance artists used local European models. Why? Because of a deception. Beauty and holiness became associated with paleness in European culture. Why? Because they are not going to venerate the true power, Yahweh and his son Yahushua, the angels and the Israelites, as being who they really are, brown-skinned people. Naturalistic realism replaced earlier symbolic style. It was not symbolic. They were real symbols. And that's why when Esau came in, they said, look, whiteness is purity. You had to move out the way. Colonial expansion spread European imagery worldwide. That's right. And this is how they were able to push because at that time, when they started conquering the world, they were loosed out of their prison sentence. And what was the first thing they did? Deceive the world, as we read. So if you want, I can also explain. So that's it on that. Let's go back to Revelation 20, verse 7 now. So verses 1 to 3 is when Esau fell during the Roman Empire, and they were under a dark cloud for a period of 1,000 years. To fully understand the chapter, we have to jump to the 7th verse, because the 4th to the 6th verse happens later. So the 7th verse is the continuation of the 3rd verse. So the 7th verse is, and when the 1,000 years are expired, when Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, that dark cloud was taken off of them. So what did they do? Started to conquer the world. And when they conquered the world, what did they do? It says, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. During what? The time of the Renaissance period. And we see the effects of it today. Then, right, we're now at the time of the very end. So this is the continuation. Gog and Magog, or Gog, the land of Magog, which are the Russians, and the land of Magog is Magog, is of Gog or from Gog, which is their land. To gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. What is this? That's the valley of Jehoshaphat. What's this? The valley of Jehoshaphat. Armageddon. Valley of Jehoshaphat, Yahweh Yahweh's judgment, Armageddon, Harmageddon, mountain of the troops. This is the gathering and the massing of all these different armies over there on that side of the world, on the eastern side of the world, for what? For this final battle, final war, which is called World War III, when Yahushua comes back to take these devils out. Because now their kingdom is at an end. And the last and final prophecy that has to happen before all these things can really come to pass is the MOTB, which is the micro CHIP. This is why you have all these different distractions, these different podcasts and platforms, social media and talking points, and Israelites going on debates with these different clowns out here. And, these Israelites selling out, teaching that the nation could be saved, so that you could cause all these distractions to take people's minds off of this digital system going up, because the MOTB is in effect. The Michael C. is next. All right. So it says, and they went up on the breadth of the earth, which is the land of Israel, and compassed the camp of the saints about, which is the land of Israel, and the beloved city, which is Jerusalem. And fire came down from the Most High out of heaven and devoured them. So when they will come out of their prison centers, there will be a time after they deceive the world that the Lord will cause this tension and these armies to amass over there in what they call the Middle East, in that area, that region, so that Armageddon could be in full effect, so that the Lord can judge the armies. His determinations to gather the nations, that he may assemble the kingdoms of the earth to pour upon them his indignation. It said, and the devil, which is Esau, that deceived them when what? When he was let out of his prison sentence during the time of the Renaissance, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, which is what? The America being set on fire. The land of Israel is going to be set on fire too, but America is that lake of fire. Because from America, right, the Renaissance period started in so-called Europe, but it came over to this side of the world. And when it came to America, that's when it really spread like wildfire. That was the great colonialism, the great deception, right? It says, where the beast and the false prophet are, which is, the beast is NATO and EU, right? And you have also the false prophet, which is the Roman Catholic Church. And America is that place where it's going to be destroyed. There's no coincidence why you have the UN building in America, which is called the United Nations building. They say it's on so-called, what they call that, that land that was on, there's a term for it, I can't think of it right now, but it's on the soils of America in New York. All right? It says, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever, because the smoke of America is going to go up for a long period of time. All right? It says, judgment at the throne of the Most High. And I saw a great white throne. So this is the order. Revelation 20, verses 1 to 3. Then you jump down to the 7th verse, all the way down to the 15th verse. And then you jump back up to the 6th verse. I'm sorry, to the 4th verse, to the 6th verse. That's the order of it. But it's written that way on purpose. The Lord sets up stumbling blocks for those who don't want to get it. That's why to this day, this is a very controversial, even among the Israelites, this is a very controversial, chapter. So Revelation 20:11, I saw a great white throne, which is where the Most High sits, and him that sat on it, Yahweh, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, meaning the rulerships of the planet are going to flee when Yahweh Bashem Yahushua comes back. There's not going to be ruling anymore. And there was found no place for them. Why? Because they're going into captivity. When you're a slave, you have no status. That's why it says they're going to be as though they were not. Why? Because when you are a slave, you don't have any status. You see? You are property. Property does not have status. Property belongs to someone. It's a possession. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before the Most High, and the books were open, and another book was open, meaning the prophecies are going to be played out, which is the book of life, which is the elect of the nation of Israel being delivered, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books. And all you got to do is read the book. It tells you about the unbelieving and the abominable and all that, make lies and all that are going to have their part in the lake of fire, according to what? Their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, because you have dead people that have died in the seas. You had a lot of Israelites that were slain, in the Atlantic Ocean, so on and so forth. According to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell were delivered up the dead which were in them, meaning death, meaning when you die, and hell, which is the grave. So you're going to have, this is the time of the resurrection, dealing with the resurrection of the Israelites that are part of the elect that are in the graves being raised up into the chariots first, and then the elect that are on the soils of America and around the world that are going to be following up, to Yahweh Shai's chariot. Right? It says, delivered up the dead which were in them, and they will judge every man according to the works, and death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. Because once America is destroyed, which is where the lake of fire is going to be, death, which is actual death, and hell, which is the grave, is not going to ever exist or ever again among the Israelites. That's why it says in Revelation 21 and other places that the Lord shall wipe away all tears. This is the second death, right? Because the first death was what? The world being flooded by that flood. That was the first death. This is going to be the second death. The America being totally on fire, lake of fire. And that's why this deliverance and destruction is going to outshadow the deliverance and destruction of ancient Egypt. It says, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life, meaning the elect, was cast into the lake of fire. So that's the end of the story right there, and the beginning of what? The kingdom of heaven. So in the beginning of the kingdom of heaven, then we would jump up to the 4th verse to go into the beginning of the kingdom, because this 1,000-year period from verses 1 to 3 and verses 7 to 8 were already accomplished after America is destroyed and the kingdom of heaven is established. Verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them, meaning the elect of the nation of Israel, the men sitting on thrones that got the victory over the beast. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua, meaning the ones that died for this truth, and for the word of the Most High, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Yahushua 1,000 years. This is after the 1,000 years of Esau falling and coming back into power during the Renaissance, and after the destruction of America and Esau's system. That's when this takes place in the kingdom of heaven. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were fulfilled. So in the second part of the 1,000 years, or the second 1,000 years in the kingdom of heaven, the nations that are going to have no status are going to eventually go back to their lands after they served the 1,000-year period and govern among themselves, but still be tributary to us. It says this is the first resurrection, meaning the Israelites that make it on the first trip, the elect. It says, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of the Most High and of Yahushua, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And this is why there's a lot of confusion out there, because this chapter jumps back and forth in history. And although we've gone over this over and over and over again, you still have guys out there that botch it up. You see? And are winging it, wing masters, the wing master ceremony. You know? Barbecue sauce all over the place. So this what this is talking about. And if you don't know that history of the Byzantine Empire, the fall of the Roman Empire, coming back into power during the Renaissance period, you're not going to understand this chapter. And if the Holy Spirit is not working with you, you're not going to be able to discern the two different periods of the 2,000-year periods. Because you're thinking that this is the same 1,000-year period. It's talking about the same thing. It's not talking about the same thing. It's talking about Esau falling during the Roman Empire, coming back in the Renaissance period, and then when they fall and are destroyed here in America, the lake of fire, then the Israelites will sit on the throne with Yahushua for 1,000 years. After that 1,000 years, the nations will be allowed to go back to their lands, be able to set up shop, but they will still be tributary to us. It's very simple. All right? So with that, I pray that you brothers and sisters have been edified. Till next time I say, Shalom.